first time here in his district since the news broke. He told us he learned of the FBI's investigation in October and did not speak to his father about it.
I obviously wanted to pick up the phone and call my dad and say, Dad, did you actually do this? And under their advice and under my lawyer's advice, they said, you know, this is an ongoing investigation. You really ought not to do that. So we hadn't.
So you didn't pick up the phone and call your dad. You talked to your lawyer.
Well, they said, yeah. So the investigators, advised that this is an ongoing investigation, and you probably ought to talk to someone.
I underestimated
Bera's opponent.
Primary, but we're going to bring you more information as soon as we get it.
California Congressman Bera's father could be going to prison by the end of summer for making illegal contributions to his son's campaign. ABC 10's Tom Jensen was in U.S. District Court today, where Bera's father admitted he violated federal campaign finance laws.
Did your son know that these donations were being made? Can you tell us whether Ami knew?
83-year-old Bob Bera refuses to talk about whether his son Ami, the Democratic congressman from Elk Grove, knew that he was breaking campaign contribution laws when he knowingly overpaid donations into his son's campaign by hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I mean, he's saying your son knew about this.
Congressman Bera has said publicly that he didn't know anything about his father's extra contributions. The elder Bera admitted in court that he paid too much into his son's campaign and that he also made donations in the names of other people. It happened during Bera's first run for Congress in 2009, again in 2011 when he was first elected, and then in a re-election bid in 2013 against former Republican Congressman Doug Ossie.
There are no secrets in politics.
Ossie said what he meant by that comment is that if Bera did know what his dad was up to, it will eventually come out.
I don't think this issue is over. I just don't think this matter is fully resolved yet.
As part of a plea agreement, the U.S. Attorney's Office agreed not to prosecute Bera's mother for any part she might have played in the contribution scheme. Under the agreement, prosecutors also said they will recommend a prison sentence of just 2.5 years, along with a $43,000 fine. The judge doesn't have to accept that plea bargain agreement and could sentence Bera up to 5 years in prison and force him to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. In the newsroom, Tom Jensen, ABC 10 News.
In a press release today, Congressman Bera said, quote, I am incredibly saddened and disappointed in learning what my dad did. While I deeply love my father, it's clear he has made a grave mistake that will have real consequences for him. Bera also said that no one on his campaign knew about his dad's activities.
All right, some days you just got to get those chores done. We're passionate, and thank you for sharing. Well, the father of Congressman Bera pleaded guilty to federal charges today that he reimbursed contributors to his son's 2012 campaign. The U.S. Attorney's Office charges that Bob Bera solicited people to make the maximum allowable federal contribution to an Elk Grove campaign committee for his son's election. And that Bob Bera allegedly told those people that he would reimburse them. Bera's father could face more than 5 years in prison and have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines.
Governor Jerry Brown
following for you this morning. The father of California Congressman Bera could be going to prison. ABC 10's Tom Jensen was in U.S. District Court yesterday when Bera's dad admitted he violated federal campaign finance laws.
Did your son know that these donations were being made? Can you tell us whether Ami knew?
Guys, we need
And no comment. 83-year-old Bob Bera did not want to talk about whether his son, Ami, the Democratic congressman from Elk Grove, knew that he was breaking campaign contribution laws. Bob Bera admitted in court, though, that he knowingly overpaid donations to his son's campaign by hundreds of thousands of dollars. He said he also made donations in the names of other people. It happened during Bera's election races in 2009, 2011, and 2013. In a phone interview with ABC 10, Congressman Bera tells us he had no idea his father had done this.
Yeah, I wish we had known about what was going on because, had I known or anyone on the campaign, we would have been able to let my dad know right away that, these aren't the type of donations that we can accept, and we wouldn't find ourselves in this situation.
And as part of the plea agreement, the U.S. Attorney's Office agreed not to prosecute Bera's mother for any part she may have played. Prosecutors also said that they will recommend a prison sentence of 2.5 years, along with a $43,000 fine, and the judge does not have to follow.
Hey, Ami, good to see you first.
Yeah,
what's the mood like right now?
Yo, there's a lot of energy in here. People are excited.
We've always known this was going to be a tight race, but we also knew we just had to bring this race home at the end of the race. So, this is what won it for us in 2012, a grassroots movement. Hundreds of volunteers getting out there, knocking on doors, making phone calls. That's why I feel so confident this evening. We're going to bring this thing home.
We were watching the returns very closely. It is neck and neck at this point. Does it make you nervous? A lot of pressure on this race.
No, we were up 198 votes on election night 2 years ago. We ended up winning by 9,000 votes, so we know the late vote comes our way. So, we're waiting for more votes to come in. They're coming in slow tonight. The election office obviously wants to do a very good job. They did a great job in 2012. They're being very professional. They're making sure every vote gets counted. This is a close race. It's a national race. People are watching. So, our hats off to the Sacramento County Election Board, and let's get those votes counted.
And this was a race, obviously, you mentioned that this was watched nationally. A lot of the folks, a lot of the voters saw these negative ads coming in. It got a little nasty. How do you respond to the criticism? People saying that it was a bit misleading at times.
You know what? If we could get rid of all this outside money, special interest groups from Washington, D.C., Karl Rove, the Koch brothers, we would be so much better off. We'll be a lot better off, so we don't have to look at those ads tomorrow morning. That's something we could all be thankful for.
If you are elected once again and you're back in Washington, what's your first order of business?
First thing, we still got to get people working again, so let's rebuild our infrastructure. Let's rebuild our levees. Let's put people to work. Let's get things going again. Rebuild a middle class here in America.
And what's your proudest achievement this first term?
My proudest achievement is the fact that I ran on no budget, no pay. We passed no budget, no pay. I made a promise that I would not take a congressional pension and work to secure Social Security and Medicare. I did not take a pension, and we're continuing to do that. We've still got a lot more to do, though, because college costs way too much for our kids. We've got to create a middle class and recreate jobs, so we've still got a lot of work to do.
Okay, so too early to call at this point, but do you think that maybe you will have a victory speech tonight?
Well, we feel confident. When I look here, this is pretty amazing. The energy, the number of people here, young folks, more mature folks that have life experience. This is what this is about. It's not my campaign. It's our campaign. This is our community.
And if you were to say anything to your challenger tonight, what would you say to him?
You know what? It takes a lot of courage to put your name on the ballot, to put yourself out there. And as Congressman Ossie knows, it's an honor to serve our country. And, he's experienced that honor. I've experienced that honor. And this is about serving our country, not Democrats versus Republicans, but really putting the country first, putting people first, and moving us forward. That's what I'd say is it's an honor to serve.
Okay, Congressman, thank you very much for your time. I know you have a lot of people to thank. Thank you. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Kathy, thank you.
El Dorado County, why investigators say they're looking for more victims.
The father of Representative Ami Bera pleads guilty to funneling more than $250,000 into his son's campaign. What the local congressman is saying about the alleged financial crime.
After feeling the burn in Stockton, Democrats
You this morning about the issue surrounding the congressional campaign of Ami Bera. He's received criticism about campaign donations that his family made to fellow Democrats. He's come out on the record now about all of that. The congressman joins us here this morning. Congressman Bera, thanks for being here.
Sure, happy to be on, Tim.
So the criticism has to do with donations that were made to other other Democrats, and you had apparently encouraged family members to support these people. You've come out, you've defended this. Why don't you explain your side of that?
As a Democrat who's in a competitive race, I also want to get into the majority. So I've always been willing to support other Democratic candidates and ask my supporters to support those folks. And I'm in one of the toughest races in the nation. And, my colleagues have always come out to support me. And, I think they've encouraged their supporters to support me as well.
Now, it's been said that this is not illegal. We want to emphasize that what we're talking about here and what you were encouraging your family members to do is not illegal. However, some have said that it's a way of sort of skirting around limitations on donations.
Well, not at all. I mean, if my wife, or supporters want to support other Democrats to again, win Democratic races and win competitive seats, I don't think there's anything unusual about that. And again, I'm obviously in one of the toughest congressional districts in the nation. I think folks are also encouraging their supporters to support me.
Now, we've got to ask you, too, the question about your father. Your father entered a plea on all of this. What's the latest on that?
You know, I'm incredibly saddened that my father finds himself in this situation. Obviously, I love my dad,
Sure.
but, you know, he made a mistake. You know, to the U.S. Attorney's credit, the U.S. Attorney's been very forthright that, you know, neither I nor my campaign had any idea what my dad was doing, and that we've been fully cooperative with them. And in fact, I wish my dad had actually reached out, because there's so many legal ways he could have just actually helped us.
Right. Now, has he talked to you at all about this, or have you had conversations with him about this? And I'm not asking you to reveal that, but I mean, have you had a chance to talk to him?
No, we've not talked about this. Obviously, it's been an ongoing investigation, and you know, we've just been cooperative with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Okay. And has law enforcement or the prosecutors, have they asked you not to have communication? Have they sort of drawn that line for you?
That's the advice that has been given.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to a couple of other areas as well, because I know that the fight against the Zika virus is something that's very important to you. We've been talking about federal funding for what is now certainly in the minds of everybody who hears about this, a growing problem. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I look at this as a doctor and public health expert, and you know, we've had hearings in Congress. We've had our public health experts, CDC Director Tom Frieden, and NIH infectious disease specialist Anthony Fauci, in hearings that we've held. Yeah, the real issue is, if folks are going to be traveling to endemic areas, if you're pregnant, we'd probably advise you not to travel. Clearly, if you're of childbearing age, take the precautions not to get pregnant. And, you know, if you happen to go to these endemic areas, South America, Central America, Puerto Rico, and even some of the areas of the Southeast, make sure you use mosquito precautions. You know, we've talked to vector control here in the Sacramento area, and it doesn't seem like it's something at this time that we have to worry about, unless you're traveling to these other areas.
So at this point, it's not spread into the lower 48, but if you're going to travel, that's when you have to think about it.
You know, in California, we haven't seen it. You are seeing some cases pop up in Florida and Puerto Rico and some of the South. But again, in the Sacramento region, vector control hasn't seen any Zika cases.
Lucky, good thing for us too. Of course, I'm sure you're well aware of the situation down at UCLA yesterday, where we had a shooting. Now, it turned out not to be an active shooter and an act of terrorism, but nevertheless, it's violence on campus. And this is, of course, a special day as far as gun rights and gun violence are concerned. Very quickly, we want to touch on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we all want to keep our community safe. You know, when our kids go off to college or to high school, to the movies, we don't want to have to worry about them. So this is about community safety. Obviously, the vast majority of gun owners are responsible gun owners, and we certainly don't want to infringe on their rights. But we should take measures to keep our community safe. You know, reasonable background checks to make sure those that are violent or mentally ill or terrorists should not be getting these weapons. And then we should make sure we fund mental health as well.
All right, very good. Congressman, we are all out of time, unfortunately, as is the case when we do these interviews. We'd love to have you back and talk to you again. We do appreciate your time.
Great, thanks. Glad to be on, Tim.
Congressman Ami Bera joining us here on News Radio KF.
And shops.
Corruption took place here, pure and simple. You guys violated our laws.
That's Ami Bera, an Elk Grove lawmaker, and his father has now admitted to election fraud. Tonight, the man that he lost to has some harsh words for the suspect. The father of Representative Ami Bera pled guilty today to funneling more than $250,000 into his son's campaign. In federal court, the congressman's father basically admitted giving people money to donate for his son's campaign. And today he pled guilty to 2 counts of fraud. CBS 13's Jennifer McGraw from the federal court building with more on today's plea.
Fraudulent campaign funding for Representative Ami Bera came from an anonymous tip, and the findings startling. According to court documents, his father, Bobby Bera, a retired engineer, reimbursed donors more than $250,000 in campaign funds after maxing out on the allowable contributions he could give his son's campaign in 2010 and 2012. Former congressional candidate Doug Ossie, who ran against Bera in 2014 and lost, says the guilty plea is no surprise to him.
They purposefully, willfully, and knowingly violated our laws.
Investigators found over 130 improper campaign contributions involving 90 contributors over 2 elections.
I've always been a big believer in follow the money and who benefits. The net result is somebody got elected to office that probably wouldn't have gotten elected had they not had this money. And that's corruption.
Representative Bera said he wasn't aware his father was campaigning for him illegally and released this statement, quote, I'm incredibly saddened and disappointed in learning what my dad did. While I deeply love my father, it's clear he's made a grave mistake that will have real consequences for him, end quote. Since the investigation has been made public, Bera says he made immediate steps to give improper donations back to the United States Treasury and taxpayers.
Now, Bera's father faces a maximum sentence of 10 years in federal prison. He'll be sentenced in August.
The presidential primary itself will be Tuesday, June 7th.
And only on Fox 40 we are learning about federal charges filed against the father of Congressman Ami Bera. Babalal Bera is accused of making excessive campaign contributions to his son Ami Bera's campaign in both the 2010 and 2012 elections. The court documents we obtained say Bera's dad recruited relatives and friends for those donations with the promise that they would be paid back. That is a violation of the Election Act. Bera's camp released this statement, quote, I am saddened to learn of these allegations against my father. Neither I nor anyone involved with my campaign was aware of my dad's activities until we learned about it from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Bera is going for a third term this year against Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones.
One person has been
Attorney General Kamala Harris and others. Well, the father of Congressman Ami Bera is facing federal charges. Babulal Bera accused of making excessive campaign contributions to his son's campaign in both 2010 and 2012 elections. The court documents obtained by Fox 40 accused Bera's father of recruiting relatives and friends for donations with the promise that they would be paid back. That is a violation of election financing rules. Bera's camp released this statement saying, quote, I am saddened to learn of these allegations against my father. Neither I nor anyone involved with my campaign was aware of my dad's activities until we learned about it from the U.S. Attorney's Office, end of quote. Bera running for a third term this year against Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones. Well, massive tornadoes churned across parts of Oklahoma, killing at least...
After losing by a landslide to Donald Trump in the state of Indiana. The father of Representative Ami Bera pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts of election fraud in federal court. Prosecutors say 83-year-old Babalal Bera made excessive contributions to his son's 2010 and 2020. Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom and Attorney General Kamala Harris. The father of Congressman Ami Bera is facing federal charges. Babulal Bera is accused of making excessive campaign contributions to his son's campaign in both the 2010 and 2012 elections. Court documents obtained by Fox 40 reveal Bera's dad recruited relatives and friends for donations with the promise they would be paid back, which is a violation of the Election Act. Bera's camp releasing this statement saying, quote, I am saddened to learn of these allegations against my father. Neither I nor anyone involved in my campaign was aware of my dad's activities until we learned about it from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Bera is going for a third term this year against Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones. At 4:37, Fox 40 on Wild. This is just common sense.
And campaign victories clouded by criminal acts. Tonight, Ami Bera defends his father and his own reputation after felony election fraud is uncovered.
And pick a more liberal justice. The father of Elk Grove Congressman Ami Bera has pleaded guilty to funneling more than $250,000 into his son's campaign. According to court documents, Babulal Bera, a retired engineer, committed fraud by reimbursing donors for contributing to his son's campaign in 2010 and 2012. Former congressional candidate Doug Ossie, who ran against Bera in 2014 and lost, said the guilty plea is no surprise to him.
I've always been a big believer in follow the money and who benefits. The net result is somebody got elected to office that probably wouldn't have gotten elected had they not had this money. And that's corruption.
Representative Bera said he wasn't aware that his father was campaigning for him illegally and released a statement saying, I am incredibly saddened and disappointed in learning what my dad did. While I deeply love my father, it's clear he has made a grave mistake that will have real consequences for him. His father faces a maximum sentence of 10 years in federal prison and
for the crimes that he in court today admitted to, but the federal prosecutor recommended no more than 30 months, so no more than 2.5 years for the 83-year-old father of Congressman Ami Bera.
Can we get a statement from you about the charges?
Mr.
This is Babulal Bera, who would not comment after he entered his guilty plea today. He's accused of funneling nearly $270,000 of his own money into his son's 2010 and 2012 campaign accounts by asking other donors to donate and then reimbursing those people. Federal law limits the amount of money an individual can donate to a political campaign. Now, prosecutors are calling it one of the larger cases of criminal campaign finance they've seen because of the amount of money involved and the number of donors. They say they counted 90 individual contributors, but they say they've not found any indication that Congressman Bera was involved or even knew what his father was doing.
There's no evidence that we found in our investigation, which has involved a lot of interviews and a lot of review of documents. No evidence that the congressman knew of or participated in the reimbursements.
Public integrity section.
His team of federal prosecutors said they interviewed 75 witnesses and reviewed reams of bank records and campaign finance records, and they say their investigation is continuing. Congressman Bera is answering our questions today in Washington, D.C., and we hope to bring you some of that in the next hour. But for now, we do also have a written statement from him. He says, quote, "Since I learned from authorities about this investigation, my team and I have cooperated fully with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Neither I nor anyone involved with my campaign was aware of my father's activities." He goes on to say he was not aware of his father's activities until he learned about them from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Meanwhile, the U.S. Attorney says investigators learned about all of this through an anonymous tip that went to the FBI. Ami Bera's father is scheduled to be back in court for sentencing on August 4th. We're live here in downtown Sacramento. I'm Sharkina Shams, KCRA 3 News.
All right, Sharkina, thank you for that live report.
And Sharkina alluded to it, but just into the KCRA 3 newsroom literally minutes ago, Congressman Ami Bera spoke out for the first time since his father pled guilty.
Yeah, I'm sad, right? I mean, I'm worried about my father. I'm worried about, he's 84 years old. My mom's 82, and, as a son, I love my parents, but obviously disappointed with what they did.
And we're going to hear much more from Congressman Bera coming up tonight on the KCRA 3 News at 5 and 6. Today's plea deal is expected to make an already tight race for Congress even tighter. And KCRA 3's David Bienick has the political fallout for the Bera campaign on all of this. David.
Well, Lisa, here is Ami Bera's district, the 7th Congressional District in California. It stretches from Elk Grove through much of eastern Sacramento County and up to Folsom along the American River. It's considered a swing district because Democrats hold just a 3 percentage point lead over Republicans in voter registration. Now, both of Bera's victories in this district in 2012 and 2014 have been by narrow margins. In fact, last time he beat Doug Osee by less than 1 percentage point. This year, Bera has had trouble holding on to even his own party base. Labor unions and local Democratic Party bosses have been upset by Bera's support for fast-tracking the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, and now he faces political scandal from inside his own family.
There is no good choice here for Ami Bera, because if he supports his father, then it looks like he's condoning lawbreaking. He doesn't support his father. What are the optics of that? So there's no good situation, no good choice here for Ami Bera.
Now, Bera's opponent in this race is Scott Jones, and he released a statement saying simply that we need to allow the investigation in the justice system to discover all the facts and really reach their conclusions. Bera and Jones will face off in next month's primary here in California, but since they are the only two candidates on the ballot in June, they are both guaranteed a spot in the November general election. Live in the newsroom, I'm David Bienick. Now back to you.
All right, David, thank you.
As Sanders supporters gather in Stockton.
Meanwhile, the father of California Congressman Ami Bera is now under federal investigation, and he's scheduled to appear before a judge this morning.
Now, Mike Tassell is following the very latest and has more on Ami Bera's reaction to the investigation. Mike.
And good morning, Teo and Deirdre. And keep in mind, this investigation comes as Ami Bera is facing a re-election battle against Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones, and he called this a, quote, grave situation for his father. Now, Ami Bera released a statement late last night acknowledging that he has been cooperating fully with the U.S. Attorney's Office since learning of his dad's alleged activities. He added he has not discussed this matter regarding his campaign and his father with anyone but investigators. But he did offer that his father became a first-time political donor during his 2010 race for Congress. Now, in the statement, Ami Bera said of his father, quote, "He also taught me that we are all accountable for our own actions, and while I deeply love him, it is clear he faces a grave situation that will have real consequences for him." Now, Bera went on to say that his father will appear before a judge. He is scheduled this morning to be in federal court, and he reiterated that neither he nor anyone from his campaign staff was aware of his father's activities. Deirdre.
All right, thank you. You're Tommy Sanders.
New this morning, we are learning that the father of Congressman Ami Bera will be in a Sacramento courtroom this morning facing federal charges.
KCR 3's Mike Sell joins us now with more on what we do know.
And Teo and Deirdre, according to Ami Bera himself, this is a, quote, grave situation facing his father and his campaign activities. And keep in mind, this federal investigation and these allegations come as Congressman Bera is facing a re-election challenge from Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones. Now, Congressman Bera released a statement to KCRA 3 late last night, and in it, Bera acknowledged that he and his campaign team have been cooperating fully with the U.S. Attorney's Office. He said no one involved with his campaign was aware of his father's activities and that he has not discussed anything regarding his campaigns and his father with anyone but federal investigators. In that statement, he also added, quote, "I am saddened to learn of these allegations against my father." He went on to say, "But he also taught me that we are all accountable for our own actions, and while I deeply love him, it's clear he faces a grave situation that will have real consequences for him." We'll get more on what those consequences may be as Ami Bera's father scheduled to appear in federal court this morning. Ami Bera acknowledged that his dad became a first-time political donor during Bera's 2010 campaign for Congress. Teo.
All right, thank you, Mike. Well, one person is dead and
Tommy Sanders.
New this morning, we are learning that the father of Congressman Ami Bera will be in a Sacramento courtroom this morning facing federal charges.
KCR 3's Mike Sell joins us now with more on what we do know.
And Teo and Deirdre, according to Ami Bera himself, this is a, quote, grave situation facing his father and his campaign activities. And keep in mind, this federal investigation and these allegations come as Congressman Bera is facing a re-election challenge from Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones. Now, Congressman Bera released a statement to KCRA 3 late last night, and in it, Bera acknowledged that he and his campaign team have been cooperating fully with the U.S. Attorney's Office. He said no one involved with his campaign was aware of his father's activities and that he has not discussed anything regarding his campaigns and his father with anyone but federal investigators. In that statement, he also added, quote, "I am saddened to learn of these allegations against my father." He went on to say, "But he also taught me that we are all accountable for our own actions, and while I deeply love him, it's clear he faces a grave situation that will have real consequences for him." We'll get more on what those consequences may be as Ami Bera's father scheduled to appear in federal court this morning. Ami Bera acknowledged that his dad became a first-time political donor during Bera's 2010 campaign for Congress. Teo.
All right, thank you, Mike. Well, one person is dead and
to his son's campaigns in 2010 and 2012.
Yeah, I first learned about it in October. So, investigators came. We fully cooperated with investigators, and I was shocked.
Well, tonight, Congressman Bera says that he did not know that his father was raising hundreds of thousands of dollars illegally for his campaign.
Federal prosecutors are charging his father with crimes that could send the elder Bera to prison for years. KCRA 3's Sharkina Shams joins us live from outside the federal courthouse in Sacramento.
Kelly, Ami Bera's elderly father pleaded guilty this morning in federal court just hours after the U.S. attorney filed charges against him. But that plea agreement still comes with the possibility of years in prison, along with hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. 83-year-old Babulal Bera could not escape news cameras when he left the federal courthouse today. Inside the court, where cameras were not allowed, the elder Bera trembled, having difficulty standing for a long stretch in front of the judge. He pleaded guilty to making excessive campaign contributions and making contributions in someone else's name.
Part of the violation is that it be done willfully and knowingly, and as part of his plea, the defendant acknowledged that he did this willfully and knowingly.
Are you going to jail, sir? Bera is accused of funneling about $270,000 to his son, Congressman Ami Bera's 2010 and 2012 campaign accounts. Federal prosecutors say he asked others to contribute, then reimburse them to hide the true source of the money. And prosecutors today left open the possibility that those donors, as many as 90, could face criminal charges too.
They definitely knew what was going on. Many of them have been interviewed, and we haven't made any final decisions on them as yet. The investigation is still going on.
Federal law limits the amount of money an individual can donate to a campaign. Congressman Bera says he didn't know what his father was allegedly doing.
Yeah, I'm sad, right? I mean, I'm worried about my father. I'm worried about, he's 84 years old. My mom's 82, and as a son, I love my parents, but obviously disappointed with what they did.
Now, a judge could ultimately decide to sentence Mr. Bera, the elder Bera, to as much as 10 years in prison. But today, the federal prosecutor recommended 2.5 years. He'll be back for his sentencing on August 4th. Meanwhile, Bera's campaign says that they have purged that money. So today, they say they sent a check for close to $270,000 to the U.S. Treasury. Live here in downtown Sacramento, I'm Sharfina Shams, KCRA 3 News.
Shara, thanks.
Today's guilty plea by Bera's father will likely make an already tight race for Congress even tighter. KCRA 3's David Bieniek joins us now with the fallout Bera could face at the polls. David?
Kelly, let me give you a look at the 7th Congressional District. This is Ami Bera's district. It stretches from Elk Grove through eastern Sacramento County up through Rancho Cordova and into Folsom. Now, this is considered a swing district because Democrats hold only a 3-point advantage in terms of voter registration over Republicans. And this is just the latest reason that now more than ever, this district is up for grabs.
Following his razor-thin win 2 years ago in the most expensive House race in the nation, Ami Bera called for campaign finance reform.
I think our elections would be better served if you got rid of all this outside money.
Today, outside federal court, Bera's former opponent, Doug Ossie, was the first to react to Bera's father's admission that he collected illegal campaign contributions for his son.
I think there are significant questions that remain unanswered.
Like what? What's the biggest question in your mind?
How far from the tree does the seed fall?
However, people we spoke to today in Elk Grove said they're willing to consider Bera's explanation that he knew nothing about what his father was up to.
I'm going to be on the side of Ami Bera, that he probably didn't know anything about it.
No, I wouldn't hold it against him. I really wouldn't.
Bera's current opponent, Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones, released a statement saying simply, "We need to allow the investigation in the justice system to discover all the facts and reach their conclusions." But the National Republican Congressional Committee, which has again targeted Bera's seat, now has fresh ammunition.
It's unclear what extent this will play in the campaign come this fall, but I think it's safe to say that voters will be very interested to find out exactly what's been going on.
Bera has already been having trouble holding on to his Democratic base for supporting fast-tracking of the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership and for voting for increased security screenings of Syrian refugees trying to come to the U.S.
The stakes are higher this year because the House could be in play, absolutely right. And so what happens with Bera's seat really does have potential national implications.
Bera and Jones will face off in next month's California primary on June 7th. But because they are the only two candidates in this race, they're both guaranteed a spot on the November general election ballot. Kelly, back to you.
David, thank you. And we should mention coming up tonight at 6:30, our political analyst will join us here in studio.
There are potential victims to come forward. And the father of Congressman Ami Bera has pleaded guilty to election fraud. In federal court, 83-year-old Babulal Bera admitted to illegally donating money to two of his son's campaigns. Prosecutors say the elder Bera asked people to donate to Congressman Ami Bera's 2010 and 2012 campaign accounts, then reimbursed those people with his own money. Congressman Bera says he did not know that any of that was happening. Donors could also face charges.
Well, the results are in tonight.
Ask you about the story that we talked about before, this guilty plea today by Congressman Ami Bera's father in federal court. When you look at how tight that district is, what kind of impact do you think that this is going to have on him?
Well, actually, I think that it could have some pretty substantial impact. I mean, Trump is not going to be popular in California. So from a California standpoint, Trump is going to be a loser. He may do well around the country, but not here. That meant that that district was going to probably have depressed turnout among Republicans. Now, though, you have a situation where there's this pretty big scandal. It's going to damage Ami Bera in a race that I was thinking might start tilting more towards Ami Bera. Now it's going to go back to dead heat. So I'll be curious how it all works out.
Robin, what are you expecting in terms of money on both sides? This is in the national spotlight. Millions of dollars will be pouring into this district.
Yeah, I do think that this is a really big problem for Ami Bera. I think it's going to be tough for him because now Republicans are going to be pouring money, even more money, into campaign commercials. And I do think voters will give Ami Bera the benefit of the doubt until they see that just wave of commercials against him, tying him to this particular scandal.
We already heard from some of them tonight. Of course, Ami Bera saying he did not know about those campaign contributions. Robin, Kevin, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Always fun to be the underdog in front of a big crowd as well. Thanks, Brian. Now to political news of a very different sort at this hour. Congressman Ami Bera's father was in federal court in Sacramento this morning, accused of violating campaign finance laws. Babalal Bera, known as Bob, is charged with making excessive campaign contributions and making contributions in the name of another person. Court documents obtained by KCRA3 claim that he and his wife had already made the maximum allowable contributions to Ami Bera's campaign, and that they recruited relatives, friends, and acquaintances after that to do the same. He would then reimburse them for their donations. Prosecutors say these contributions were made in the 2009 and 2011 election cycles. At one point, according to the documents, Bera donated over $43,000 in just a single election year. If convicted, Ami Bera's father could face up to 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000.
Think about it, because dads don't tell you everything.
Now, prosecutors say this involved about 90 donors and nearly $280,000 that Ami Bera's father gave to his son's campaigns.
Late this afternoon, we heard from the congressman himself about this crisis that for him is both personal and professional. KCRA3's Sharakina Shams is live in Sacramento now with more.
Well, Edie, just hours after the U.S. attorney filed those charges against Babalal Bera, he appeared in federal court today to plead guilty. 83-year-old Babalal Bera walked out of the federal courthouse without answering our questions after pleading guilty to criminal charges. Cameras were not allowed in federal court, where the elderly Bera was shaking as he struggled to stay standing for a long stretch of time in front of a judge. Federal prosecutors say Bera funneled about $270,000 of his own money to the 2010 and 2012 campaigns of his son, Congressman Ami Bera. They say he asked others to contribute money and later reimbursed them to hide the fact that he was the true source of the funds.
The investigation has identified over 130 improper campaign contributions involving approximately 90 contributors.
The law limits the dollar amount that an individual can contribute to a campaign, but prosecutors also say they haven't found evidence that the congressman himself knew what was going on.
There's no evidence that we found in our investigation, which has involved a lot of interviews and a lot of review of documents. No evidence that the congressman knew of or participated in the reimbursements.
Here's what Congressman Bera said from Washington, D.C. today.
I had no idea. And the sad thing is, had my dad just reached out or had someone let us know, we would have told him that you couldn't do this. And there were lots of legal ways that he could have actually supported my campaign.
As for those 90 donors, here's what the U.S. attorney said today about them.
They definitely knew what was going on. Many of them have been interviewed, and we haven't made any final decisions on them as yet. The investigation is still going on.
Babalal Bera could, under the law, be sentenced to as much as 10 years in prison. The federal prosecutor today recommended 2.5 years, and he'll be back here to be sentenced in August. Meantime, Congressman Bera's campaign manager told us today that just today the campaign purged all that money, meaning they sent a check for about $270,000 to the U.S. Treasury. Live here in downtown Sacramento, I'm Sharakina Shams, KCRA 3 News.
Sharakina, thank you. And this plea deal will likely make an already tough re-election race for Congressman Bera even tougher. Bera and the Democrats have just about a 3-point lead in voter registration in the 7th Congressional District. In 2014, he beat Republican Doug Osee by less than 1 percentage point. Now the National Republican Congressional Committee has again targeted Bera and plans to spend a lot of money to try to defeat him. And Republicans say they're not buying Bera's defense that he knew nothing about what his father was up to.
Working with that.
I think it's very unlikely for his father, his family, and his close friends to have been doing this over multiple election cycles and for him to have no idea this was going on. So I think it defies credibility for that to be happening, and we think there's more to this story.
Bera's Republican opponent is Sacramento Sheriff Scott Jones. In a statement, Jones said, quote, "We need to allow the investigation and the justice system to discover all the facts and reach their conclusions." Bera and Jones will face off in next month's primary, then again in November's general election. Continuing Commitment 2016 coverage and
Campaign cash involving California Congressman Ami Bera is at the center of a federal investigation involving his father. This afternoon, Bera's father pleaded guilty to a campaign fundraising scheme. Good afternoon. I'm Brian Heap.
I'm Lisa Gonzalez. Prosecutors say this involved about 90 donors and nearly $280,000 he gave to his son's campaigns. The question is, how much did Congressman Ami Bera really know about this?
KCRA 3 Sharkina Shams has been in federal court today. So, Shar, what have you learned?
Well, Brian, under the law, the elder Bera could be sentenced to as much as 10 years in